Welcome, everybody. We're going to give a few minutes here. We'll let people join in, and we will start at exactly 12 o'clock. Welcome if you've just joined in. We're going to start in about 20 seconds. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join this. I'm going to make this hopefully as beneficial as possible in about 30 minutes. We're going to talk about really what's going to make a great team going into 2026. And I've had the good fortune of working with over 300 managers and at all levels, from frontline all the way up to directors and VPs over the last year, and have had a lot of feedback in regards to what is it. I've seen great teams, and I've seen teams that are average and struggling. And there is a sequence to this, and there's a few things that make a great team that average and struggling teams don't do. That's what we're going to cover. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit and go to the screen here. Just to give you some background in terms of who I am, I have a podcast that I've run since 2018, Learning from Leaders, the company that I started back in 2008. My first book was in 2022, The Leadership Bridge, and then the book that's going to be launching in just a few days is The Missing Piece, What Great Teams Do That Others Overlook. And these are just some of the companies that either I've worked with in the past or I'm working with now, just with this model in terms of helping them to develop great teams. So what are our objectives? Well, we're going to talk about why accountability is a low bar. And I know that's the buzzword that seems so important today. And I'm going to take a contrarian view to that I think that's what's hurting us. That the more accountability we put on something, the less ownership we get. And that's what great teams shares. They share ownership. So I'm going to talk about a sequence in this, about support, celebrate, and then challenge, and how that creates the missing piece. And then the last thing I'm going to present to you is a model that I've created and have used for a little over a year now called Catch. And it's a model that helps individuals to have conversations earlier on with individuals, either around performance or behavior issues, because those seem to be the difficult things that we have. And once they get away from us, right, once we don't catch those bad behaviors and performance early, it causes us a lot of problems. So really, that's what this is going to look at. So to sort of set the stage here, accountability is the focus, right? When we look at Google searches over the last 4 years, you can see that the word accountability around employees or systems or team accountability has increased. Yet at the same time, if you look at surveys from organizations like Gallup or Press Ganey or others, engagement is at a 10-year low. Now, to me, I don't think it's causal, but certainly there's a correlation there that the more we're focused on accountability, the less ownership that we're getting. And what's the impact of that been? Well, employee engagement in the US is about 31%. Manager engagement, this is the first time this has been this low, 27%. It's the lowest in a decade. Now, the important thing here is that 70% of disengagement is the result of who you report to, right? And if anybody's had a chance to look at Gallup's Q12, I often refer to those, I think they're almost the answers to the test, that those 12 questions can help us a lot to understand, like, what is it that is going to create engagement on our teams? When we look at satisfaction and retention, again, by groups like Gallup, 50% of US Canadian employees are actively looking or watching for a new job. This is Gallup 2025. Also, back to that 4-year look back. In 2021, those that reported as being extremely satisfied was about 26%. That's now down to 19% as of 2025. Daily stress remains at about 50%, and it's even higher in younger managers, those that are 35 years or younger. And I've had some interesting conversations on this. And what I mean by that is that some of the managers that I've worked with, especially those groups that are under 35, have said, we're working really hard, but a lot of the things that were available to us before, especially things like housing, cost of living, have all increased. Yet we're working this much harder, and we can't even afford those things that probably previous generations, yeah, they worked hard, but also they were able to get houses and maybe vacation homes or camps on a lake, things like that. And those are missing now. So this idea of well-being is certainly tied into accountability in terms of the pressure that it creates. So why do we need to change the conversation? Well, command and control accountability drives compliance. It doesn't drive ownership. Great teams have inspired ownership. Accountability does not inspire ownership. Ownership inspires accountability, though. That's the difference here, right? So when accountability comes first, right, the question becomes, who do we blame? And if you think about it in that regard, motivation becomes extrinsic and engagement diminishes. And we're seeing that over the last 4 years, it being at an all-time low. We're seeing the significance of that. When it's ownership first, it's not about who do we blame. It's about how do we get there together? Motivation becomes intrinsic. I don't need you to tell me how to do something. I take ownership for it. I want to do that. And that's where engagement strengthens when that happens. So to build a great team first, in the book, I talk about this in chapter 2. This is so important that you need both of these things. One is that you have to believe that what you're being asked to do, it's worth the effort. And that's motivation and discipline, I would say. Secondly, is you need to believe that you're capable of doing it. And that's really what we'll talk about now. But if you don't believe that it's worth the effort of what it's going to take to build a great team, then you will never get there. And I have often had people will push back at times saying, well, it's not that simple. And my pushback to that is to say, it is that simple, but it's not that easy. And that's oftentimes what holds average and struggling teams back, is they're not willing to invest what it's really going to take to make a great team. It's not that it's not available, it is, but it takes work. So first you need to believe it's important, it's worth the effort. And next you need to believe that you're actually capable of doing it. Some of the human drivers and cables that I talk about in terms of how do we build, support, celebrate, and challenge. The drivers here that we talk about, these are human drivers we all have. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, what level you're at. We all want a sense of belonging, that network. We all want a sense of fairness. We all want to feel as though we're empowered, that we have a sense of autonomy. We all want a sense of dignity, to feel like we're appreciated, we're valued. And we all want a sense of stability. We want predictability, either in who I report to or in the organization. What are the rules? Those are drivers that, based on how we behave, we can look and say, is my behavior satisfying these, or is it violating these in other people? Because when it's satisfied in other people, they become more engaged. When it's not being satisfied in other people, and it's the result of my behaviors toward them, people become less engaged, become less collaborative. Now, below here, cables are 6 behaviors that I talk about in terms of, these are the behaviors that if you want to make sure that you're hitting on all of those drivers for employees, these are the behaviors. One is you act consistently, you walk the talk. The other is you demonstrate appreciation, and that's about recognition. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The next is about creating a sense of belongingness, and that's about connection. The next is how we listen. And I go deep into a certain way that I talk about listening, which is authentic listening, which involves 4 different ways that we listen. The next is around empathy, the need for us to imagine where somebody else is. I just wrote an article recently where what I talked about is that empathy has an image problem, because to empathize with somebody doesn't mean that I have to agree with them. It just means I have to try and understand where they are coming from. And then the last is specifics. We need to have clear expectations for other people. What's expected, what you can expect from me, and then follow through. I would say 90% of the organizations I go into, that it's about working on issues, it's because of that last one. There aren't clear expectations, or there are clear expectations and they haven't been followed through. And that's where that catch model that I'm going to talk about at the end here, I think, is a valuable tool that you can use easily to try and make sure that you're addressing both performance and behavior issues early on. So we talk about support, celebrate, and challenge. I'm not sure if anybody has had an opportunity. This is the Queensferry Bridge. It's in Edinburgh, Scotland. And this was obviously when it was under construction. It's the longest 3-towered cable stay bridge in the world. And it represents perfectly this model that I use now called support, celebrate, and challenge. It's what great teams do. And each one represents each component of that. And average and struggling teams, they start with accountability. Great teams, they follow a different sequence in terms of how they build this great team that we're going to talk about. So the first one is support, right? This is all about having each other's backs. You need that first. People need to feel as though you have their backs. And when we do that, that builds us a lot of credibility to be able to have difficult conversations later on. As I say here, it creates psychological safety and trust, makes risk-taking possible. Um, I mentioned here that third bullet, social exclusion and rejection and the impact that it has on our brain. If you think about it this way, is that there's a lot of research out there that says, or that has demonstrated that when people feel as though they've been excluded, the same part of their brain that experiences physical pain is the same part of the brain that gets impacted when they are feeling as though they're socially excluded or they've been left out of something. It's almost like every time that you do that to somebody else, you can imagine it's like breaking their arm that when you do that. So support is the first thing that we're building here. It's our first tower. The next one is around recognition. This is about the celebrate tower. We appreciate each other consistently for effort, accomplishments, in who people are, the contributions they make. We know that this one is so important because it fuels motivation and morale. And there's actually research with this one as well, a lot of research. One that I will mention here, and there's a lot to this, is that when people are recognized, especially when it's unexpected, dopamine levels in them spike. And this is just like the happiness molecule being like elevated in those people. So obviously they're going to be more engaged. More importantly, when people feel as though they should be recognized for things that they're doing and they're not, dopamine doesn't even just stay neutral, it actually goes down. So if you think about this in organizations where, back to those engagement studies, a lot of those people probably are thinking like, I'm working really hard. I feel like all I hear about is what I don't get done. Then you can think about it in terms of you're constantly drawing dopamine out of those individuals when that happens, which naturally is going to lead to disengagement. The last bridge that we build here, though, is challenge, right? And this is why it's last. This is what great teams do. They follow this order first, this sequence, because when you follow the sequence, it's not about pushing you to make me look better. It's pushing you to make us better. So it's honest, direct feedback. It's only effective when those first two things are there first. Unfortunately, we're in an environment where this one, challenge, we call it accountability, is often done first. We have problems with people's performance, with their behaviors, and we say, you know what, to improve this, we're going to add more accountability. What we do is we push people further away from really what needs to happen, and that's about taking ownership for what's going on. When you start with challenge, right? Support and celebrate are not developed, right? Again, it's I challenge you, and then when you do this, then I'll support you, then I'll recognize you, and it doesn't work that way. So this is where I introduce this model called Catch that I think is really valuable and has been valuable. So how do you catch performance and behavior issues early? A lot of the conversations that I will have when I'm doing workshops with individuals, I'll ask people, have you had one of those situations where you wish you had called out behaviors earlier or performance earlier and you didn't, and it just got worse? It got away from you. And everybody raises their hand. We've all had one of those situations. Well, if that's the case, do you wish you had an opportunity, if you could go back, that you would have caught it earlier? And most agree to that. The problem is that people have a difficult time saying, well, I just don't know how to have those conversations. So what I did was I created a model that's really, it aligns with support and celebrate and very much into challenge too. So with any performance or behavior issue, the important thing is here, you can't let this go on for a long period of time, because then you've trained them to start creating a behavior and a habit. This starts early where it's, let's just say it's somebody that's showing up late for work, 15 minutes, doesn't seem like a big deal. If it happens more than twice, you call that out. I just want to have a conversation with you, right? The behavior is, for the last 2 days, right, or twice this week, you've shown up 15 minutes late. That's addressing the pattern, right? So we've hit on the C and the A. The next one is really important, though, is you talk about the impact, because I think there are times when people don't make the connection, because I might be thinking, it's a big deal. 15 minutes, is it really that big of a deal? That's where you're able to say, here's the impact. I know it probably doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you show up 15 minutes late, this is the problem that it causes for the rest of the team, right? So now it gives them an opportunity to understand, like, that impact, as small as it is, it actually is a bigger thing. The next part is as important, though, is you check in with that person. And this is why catching things early, this is not a pattern for this person, and you want to catch it early, because at this point, if I were to say, listen, for the last 2 days this week, you've shown up 15 minutes late. I know you don't think it's a big deal, right? But here's the impact that it's having on the rest of the team when you do that. The check-in part is next. This isn't like you. Is anything going on, right? So what have I done? I've set the expectation. I've given this person a reputation to live up to, right? It's not about me pointing out what you're not doing right. I mean, it is in a sense, but it's also saying this is not normal behavior from you, almost like you're better than this. So there must be something else going on. And it gives that person the opportunity to feel as though this is collaborative. This is not just me coming down on them. This is really about showing concern at this point. This is not like you. Is everything okay? Right. And then the last part of this is where that answer goes is to say, okay, now I'm going to help them create a solution to say, what can we do to make sure that this doesn't go on next week too? How can we stop this now? That's the catch model. Now, I've had somebody say to me, well, what happens if somebody doesn't want to play along with this type of conversation? And my response to that is good, that at least you know early on that this person is probably going to be a bigger challenge, or this is going to be a bigger issue than you thought. And at least you've caught it early rather than 3 months down the road where you wished you had just addressed this much earlier. That's the catch model, right? And it does just what it's meant to do. That acronym is catch it early, call out the behavior, address the pattern, talk about the impact, check in with them. This isn't like you, and then help them create a solution to make sure that doesn't go on any further, right? That's the model. It's one of the things that we talk about in that challenge chapter in the book. This part I think is vitally important though, and I've told my kids who have all played sports through high school and into college, is that if you want to be on a great team, you have to first commit to being a great teammate. And whether you're the coach, you're a parent, you're the leader of the team, you're the president, you are still a teammate. If you want to have a great team, you have to still think of yourself as a teammate. And to do that, obviously, you need to recognize other people, right? You support them, you appreciate them, right? You celebrate them and you challenge them. But more importantly, you have to do this for yourself. You can't give what you don't have. And that's what I often find where when people are exhausted and spent themselves, if they haven't taken care of themselves physically, emotionally, spiritually, how can you ever be there for other people? You don't have the same bandwidth to be able to be present for other people. And that's why this is so important, right? You can't genuinely be there for other people without making sure that you're there for yourself first. Sounds selfish, it's not. Exercise, diet, sleep, meditation, all things that have a lot of research behind how important they are. You need to make the time for yourself, because the better you are in terms of your own well-being, the better you are going to be to navigating the challenges that you face and also being present and helpful for other people. If you think about it in terms of an athlete, if I didn't train, if I didn't eat right and get the right amount of sleep, when we showed up on game day, I would not be the best teammate I could be, because I wouldn't be ready to play the game. I wasn't doing the things that were necessary. This is no different than any other aspect. I need to take care of myself so that I can be there for other people. It's vitally important, and I think something that doesn't get talked much at all, at least not in the same conversations often, as being a better leader, having a better team. You need to lead yourself better. That's going to be important as well. So the master blueprint, this is why I call it a master blueprint, because it works everywhere. This is the same for families, for marriages, for sports teams, for organizations, whether it's through onboarding, remote work, hybrid work. This system fits in any of those situations that you're in. It's the same sequence that matters. Support, have each other's backs, celebrate each other, and then you're really able to challenge each other, right? Not to make me look better or you feel uncomfortable, but to make us better as a team. That's what we're working toward. So what's the next step you can take? Well, as you go into this week, you can ask yourself, right? What's one thing I can do to support people more, to have their backs? What's one thing I could do to recognize people more? What's one thing that I could do, and maybe not to challenge, but to say, how do we get better? How do I get better as a teammate this week? In organizations that I'm working with now, what I ask them to do or challenge them is at the beginning of the week, you ask yourself those 3 questions. What can I do this week to make sure that people know I have their backs? And then you ask yourself at the end of the week, how did I do this week? You could do that daily if you wanted. What am I going to do this week to make sure that I don't overlook recognizing people for the effort that's getting put into what they're doing? And then at the end of the week, how did I do? And then at the beginning of the week, what can we do or what can I do to help us be a better team, a stronger team by the end of the week? And then when you get to the end of the week, you ask yourself the same question. What did I do to make us better as a team this week? You can do that yourself. You can do that with all those people that are on your team. Challenge yourself, challenge those people on your team to do the same thing. So as we sort of review here, right? Ownership, it's the missing piece. Accountability is the low bar. It's like settling for second place when first is available. Ownership is what it takes, and it's available to any of us. It's simple, but not easy. You need to create an environment when people feel as though you have their backs, when they feel as though they're appreciative of what they're doing, they will be much more receptive to how you challenge them to be better themselves and be better as a team. That's all you're working on. Average and struggling teams, they don't do that. They settle for accountability, or they try and add more accountability to solve a problem that will never be solved through accountability. It can only be solved through ownership. To do this, though, you have to believe it's worth it. And you have to commit first to being a great teammate if you're going to be a great team. As I told my kids, it's not even that you're guaranteed of being on a great team by committing to it. But what I do guarantee you, and I guarantee them as well, is that if you don't commit first to being that great teammate, you won't have a great team. You can't have a great team if you're not committed first to having that yourself. As part of you registering for this, you received a PDF from me that has that 10-minute great team and teammate checklist on it. If you're uncomfortable downloading or opening up that PDF, yesterday I actually downloaded the article or wrote the article, and it's actually on my featured page on my LinkedIn page. You can actually go right to that. And if you want to print out actually the article, you'll see the whole assessment is right there for you. It's well worth it. It gives you an opportunity and a starting point as you go into 2026 to really set the groundwork. Where am I as a teammate and as our team? And what do we want to do going forward? You can do it yourself and you can do it with your team. Last thing, this book will launch on January 6th. It would mean a great deal to me if you do order it. You don't need to order it. A lot of the things that I have put on here are things that I talk about in the missing piece. So it's out there. I want to build great teams coming into next year. I want to help you do that. It's possible, but it doesn't start with accountability. It starts with creating an environment where you're going to build ownership first. I hope you found this valuable and helpful. If anybody's interested, if they want to talk about me coming in and doing an intro to their team, I'm happy to do those, right? I obviously only have a limited amount of time. I will do those at no cost. If you think it's worthwhile for your team, I'm happy to have that meeting with you to see if we can maybe do a 45-minute workshop specific to your team. Again, I only have so many of those that I can offer, but I do want to do that because I do think it's this important. A great team is available to all of us. Hope that you will take the time to have a great team going into next year.